Models in economics. As part of your lab, part of what you're going to be doing in the second half of this semester is to choose a topic and create a simple economics model for it. Recall that a model is the starting point for applied economics research. The model gives you something to test. And as you learned earlier this semester, economic models are typically communicated as equations. So I took this right from one of Christina's earlier PowerPoints. Any economic model explaining the relationship between some variable y and another variable x can be summarized as y equals f of x. The equation tells us that y is a function of x. It also tells us that the value of y depends on the value of x in some way. You can also say that x determines or causes y. It's a very simple model. Turns out it's really useful. Okay, I'm going to try one a little more complicated. So you have y is equal to f of x1 and x2. So y depends on both x1 and x2. And x1 and x2 cause y. X and y variables. Let's look at some conventions. The first one is dependent and independent. Okay, so here we go again. Y equals f of x1 and x2. Y is the dependent variable. It depends on x1 and x2. And x1 and x2 are the independent variables. So x1 and x2 are going about their merry way and they're doing what they want, and as they move around, y follows them. Y is connected to them. Y is caused by them. You can also say that x1 and x2 determine the value of y. We can also talk about the equation as left-hand side and right-hand side. Okay, so as you might guess, y is on the left-hand side, and we call that the left-hand side variable. There's only one left-hand side variable. You can have numerous right-hand side variables, and in this equation, x1 and x2 are right-hand side variables because they're on the right-hand side. And finally, x and y are also used to mean, so for example, y, the dependent variable, is called the dependent variable. And let me say that again. The dependent variable is also called the y variable, and it's also called the left-hand side variable. And the reason I'm telling you this is that as the instructors work with you on your projects, you're going to have a model. And you're going to be doing various things, getting data, doing this, doing that. And the instructor's going to say, well, what's your model? And they might say, and you'll be like, huh? And they'll say, like, what's the y variable? And your y variable is going to be what's on the left-hand side, your dependent variable. And they'll say, what's your x variable? That's your independent variable, the right-hand side. And so that's why it's really useful to know that all these things are the same and what they mean. Okay. So for your data project, you will investigate whether something that matters a lot in life depends on money. Things that matter a lot in life might include education, environmental quality, gender equity or women's empowerment, happiness, or health. And actually, these are things that I have the project set up for you to do. So there's reading, there's data. These are the topics basically that you can choose. So you might want to start thinking about that when you get together with your group. And your group is going to have to choose one, so you'll have to agree on your topic. All right, so how do you do the model? First thing you do is think about what is causing what, or what depends on what. What is your dependent variable and what is your independent variable? So let's say you're just doing some other topic for some other class, and you want to know about inflation. You want to do something about inflation. So you have to think, okay, am I interested in what causes inflation, or am I interested in what inflation does to some other variables in the economy? Okay. So for this project, for your 307 project, it's pretty straightforward, because it's asked, does something that matters a lot in life depend on money? It even uses that word depend. And so you know that the something that matters, that depends on something, that's the dependent variable. And money is going to be the independent variable. So as countries say income goes up, to people, are people happier? That might be a question that we're asking. All right, now I'm going to use health as a dependent variable because it's easier to say, just as an example. It could be what you use. Okay, so health is a dependent variable. It's something that matters a lot in life. It's going to go on the left-hand side. And money is the independent variable, so it's going to go on the right-hand side. So the first thing to do is write out your model with words. So here, health is a function of money. Health depends on money. Money determines health. So this simple equation tells us all three things. They're related. They're related in a specific way where money moves and health follows. So money determines health. That's what I'm proposing. Okay, so that's how we start. The third thing is that you replace the words with one-letter representations of the words. So health equals F of money becomes H equals F of M. Now that looks like economics, doesn't it? The last thing is that you explain the letters and how they relate to each other. So this is some common boilerplate language. We propose the following model. H is a function of M, where H, health, is positively related to M, money. Okay? Huh? All that just to say that health is positively related to money? Yes. That is how economists communicate with each other. And once you get used to it, you can see it's very, very efficient. I can just look at a paper and say, oh, I'm going to look at the model, and I'll know, okay, what's on the left-hand side, what's on the right-hand side, what is the story, in a very, very concise way that the researcher is trying to tell me. Okay, so I want to go over some model conventions and elements of models. All right, you already know, I think, that the terms in your model are called variables. The variables H and M from that earlier model are italicized both in the equation and in the text, so that's a convention, so you know that it's a variable. When you explain the model, you have to say what all of the letters mean, what all the variables are, and then you also have to say how the independent variables and the dependent variable are related. So we need to know, are the X variables positively or negatively related to the Y variable? So here's an example. I've made my little model a little bit more complicated by adding a P term. Okay, so let's say I have health is a function of M, money, and P, pollution. Then I'd have to say, okay, well, if money goes up, then I think that there's better health or more health. And if pollution goes up, I think there's less health. So money is positively related to health, more money, more health. Pollution is negatively related to health, more pollution, less health. So that's my model, and that's how I explain it. Well, how do you come up with the right-hand side variables? You can use common sense and something that economists call casual empiricism. Casual empiricism is what you notice around you without a lot of in-depth analysis. So you might notice that traffic increases when gas prices fall, or you think it does. So that would be something that you could test. That could be a model. People are friendlier when the weather is nice. You could also think of ways to test that. So that's casual empiricism. You also need to review relevant literature for what others have found and the models they used. When I do research, I like to start with my common sense or my intuition and my casual empiricism. I like to think of everything I think that might affect my Y variable and think about how I think that might work. And then I go to the literature and I'm like, oh, I might have missed something. But that way, by thinking about it first, I know that I've done it fresh without sort of being narrowed by the literature. And you're going to do the same thing in lab. You're going to, with your group, come up with the topic that you want. One of your X variables is going to be probably income. Actually, it's going to be income. That's what we're going to use for money. And then the other variable will be something that comes out of your common sense, a discussion that you have. And then you're also going to do a reading that will give you ideas for other variables that you might want to include in your model. So for your project, in addition to developing, you're going to have to do a justification as well. So we've talked about how you develop, how you get to the variables you're going to choose, And then you have to formally, and you'll need to do this in your paper, justify the variables. So just wanted to add that as well.